when I eat carbohydrates, even a healthy carbohydrate like brown rice, my blood sugar levels spike quite quickly. And we had a conversation, and then she said something that changed my life. She said, yeah, it looks like it's driven by a food intolerance. Looks like it's dairy. They're a lot more, for me, they're a lot more advanced in their medical health prescription than we are, say, having lived in the UK. I've lived in, obviously America for a number of years, and then living in New Zealand, where the Western medical diet has become quite narrow.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes. Hello, everyone. This is Sifu Slim, and I'm coming to you live with another cool interview. And I have the distinct pleasure today to interview none other than Ben Warren from very far across the seas. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, and Ben, introduce yourself and tell us where you are.
Yeah, I'm Ben Warren. I am in New Zealand, and so I'm in about half out the North Island. Most people, New Zealand. It's by Australia, just in case your geography. You were looking out the window in geography at school. So we're kind of hanging in the middle of the little island in the middle of the Pacific. We're about 3 hours flight away from our nearest other country per se, big country, Australia, and so quite remote. And been doing some pretty fun things here in New Zealand regarding the country's health and nutrition.
That's important. And so to bring everyone up to speed on you, the clinician, and your ability to be like you were 20 years ago, I'm sure in North London, you played more golf than you do in a tropical paradise of New Zealand. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So my background, I'm originally from just north of London, and I became a very good golfer quite young, and got a golf scholarship to the University of South Carolina at Aiken, which is a really good golfing school, and graduated in experimental psychology. Natural progression was to become a pro golfer, and met my wife, who's a Kiwi. So that's what we say in New Zealand for somebody who's from New Zealand. You'll probably know kiwi as a fruit, so I met a Kiwi, met a New Zealand girl, and at university, and so she brought me back to New Zealand, and so I guess I'm a souvenir from her overseas experience. And it's natural progression was to become a pro golfer, but I had a serious back injury once I'd moved away from my coaches and trainers at university, and I went on a course. So I became a professional golf coach, and I went on a course to learn about optimal joint mechanics, biomechanics for the golf swing. And a lady just looked at me and she said, "Ben, I hope you don't mind me saying this. I can see you've got a bad back." And I was like, "Oh yeah, how do you know I've got a bad back?" And she's like, "Well, I can see you've got a twist in your pelvis, scoliosis in your spine, one shoulder higher than the other. Your transverse abdominal muscle's not firing very well when you swing the golf club. Your back's probably stuffed." And I'm like, it actually is. And we had a conversation, and then she said something that changed my life. She said, yeah, it looks like it's driven by a food intolerance. Looks like it's dairy. And and I looked at her like, you're nuts. How does that work? And I'm like, how does that actually work? You know, how's the food intolerance give me a bad back? And she's like, well, you've got shared nerve innervation from spinal segments, and so that as soon as you get a problem in your intestines, you're going to start shutting down these muscles that stabilize your pelvis. And I'm like, well, what makes you think it's dairy? And she goes, well, you don't breathe very well through your nose. Your head's migrated forward so you can breathe better through your mouth. And I was like, huh. And so anyway, I was very skeptical, and I'm like, surely there must be a test that I can take. And she goes, yeah, you need to do an IgA ELISA blood test. Looks to see if your body's building immune molecules to the food you're eating. And so I'm like, great, let's organize one of them. So I got one of them, came back a number of weeks later. I had a very severe immune response to whey protein, which is a protein found in dairy, cut out dairy products. Back didn't get better straight away, but within a number of weeks, probably 2 weeks, the asthma that I'd had since I was 6 years old mysteriously just disappeared. And I was like, this is incredible. I thought I was an intelligent, smart person. I'm like, how did I not know that the food I was eating had such a huge impact on how I felt? And then I was like, how does everyone not know this? And in that moment, it turned off this wanting to hit golf balls and turned on an insatiable desire to understand about the human body, health, performance. And so I retrained actually through one of the top health and performance institutes in California, founded by Paul Chek, incredible guy, absolute genius. And so I retrained under them for 3 years, ended up getting a master's degree in holistic nutrition. And so I've been in clinical practice now over 15 years. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
So Paul Chek is someone, when I look at him, I look at not only is the intelligence, but he's a really rock solid looking guy. And he doesn't mince words. He's very polite, very friendly, very playful. But when he talks, you want to listen, and you feel like you're listening to, if you were a gladiator, he would be kind of like the coach of the gladiators. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The guy is powerful. Yeah, the guy is powerful. When he talks, you're like, whoa. Yeah, he's kind of like a fairly quiet, laid back sort of guy, but yeah, something comes up in him, and like you say, I could very much see him beside Russell Crowe in Gladiator.
Exactly. And if they have one for people he's probably in his 60s, correct?
Yeah, I think he's maybe late 50s.
Late 50s. Okay.
Yeah, but he's still just absolutely stacked, eh?
Yeah, he's tough. I don't want any part of him on the jiu-jitsu mat. I'm up to like 175 today. I'm really happy because keeping weight on is not easy for me. So my little story is that I grew up with people who were bigger frame people like yourself that could put on tissue very easily. Who's our top English golfer from the 1990s?
Nick Faldo.
Nick Faldo, yeah. When he started working out, he said that he could just put on, the endomorph could put on weight so easily. And I was like, my God, I've been working out since I was 10 years old, and it's always been a challenge because as soon as I get busy with whatever I'm doing, the weight comes flying off of me, even if I have like an all-you-can-eat buffet that night. And that's the ectomorph. It could be a blessing and a curse because I do fit on airline seats fairly easily.
Yeah, it is. That's the challenge of individual metabolism, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the bone structure and the tissue. My bone structure kind of likes being thin. I have like a lot of moves like the Michael Jackson dance. I used to be a professional mascot, so all that stuff I can do. But when I want to put on some beef and play football or be more stable over the golf ball, stabilizing exercises help me. But when I play golf with people who are 250 and just have huge joints and huge muscles, it looks like all they have to do is take what I would consider a pitch swing and they can hit it 280 yards, where I have to do everything perfectly with the 3/4 or a full swing to hit it that far. And I for a skinny guy, I was known as a long hitter back when, in the 80s when I played with the old clubs, I could hit it 300 and people are like, well, how can you do that? And I said, I'm fit and I'm wiry, and when I swing, I get all of my rotational force into the ball very, very comfortably. And to me, it's easy to do that. But now at age 57, that's no longer part of the game. I have to do things, I'm really not a golfer anymore. I'm an athlete and a fitness guy who does golf occasionally. It's different than being a golfer like I was in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah, it's tough. I think that's where Tiger did a great job back in the day, where he was, he went from that kind of 22-year-old lean, skinny kid, and golf swing and joints weren't overly stable, so he didn't have the consistency. And I think Butch Harmon, they laid down a lot of muscle mass over those joints to stabilize those joints, so literally the joint can only go in a limited range of motion, which helps with that repeatability of the golf swing. And so, but as we get older, it becomes increasingly more challenging, and so that's part of the experience, though, right?
Yeah, that's the experience of life, adapting, and that's what Bruce Lee said years ago. He said, "You folks know the secret of life and the secret of martial arts is the same thing." And the students would come back, "Is it kicking, Bruce? Is it punching? Is it being able to defend? Is it dodging blows?" And he said, "Keep trying." And then finally somebody said adaptability, and he says, "That's the secret of life and of martial arts."
Wow. Yeah, he was a pretty smart guy, eh?
He was very smart. And so what I wanted to ask you about, you put the technical side of the gut and the physiology into the tissue in a scientific way. So before we spoke today, I wrote down one sentence, and you can tell me if this is a good way to sum it up. Intestinal to musculoskeletal system transfer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and it's really via the nervous system. So the nervous system is the conduit that communicates from the organs. So we've got shared nerve innervations from our spinal segments that are not only innervating our organs but also innervating our muscles. And so I like to think of it as like electric circuit, which essentially is electrochemical circuit. And as soon as you get a pain response on that chemical circuit, electrochemical circuit, it'll start shutting down nerve innervation. And in the same way that if you can't dislocate your shoulder just by trying to dislocate your shoulder, you then have to sort of run into it with a bad angle, and it's because the mechanoreceptors in the joint will shut down the muscles across the joint to stop you from injuring your own joint. And so whenever the body has a pain response, even though you're not feeling pain in your organs, it starts then shutting down nerve innervation. And there's some really great ways to test this around for anyone who's skilled, Pilates teachers, things like that, who's skilled with nerve testing transverse abdominal muscle, which is this deep abdominal core muscle, and then just looking at their strength and strengthen this muscle, and then eating different foods. Going back a number of years ago, I was working with one of the top basketballers. He was a young lad. He was 19. He'd already had 4 knee surgeries, and he was one of the top basketballers in New Zealand. And he kept getting knee injuries because he couldn't stabilize his pelvis, and he couldn't stabilize his pelvis because he had a major problem in his gut. And gluten was the problem. And so gluten's obviously a protein found in wheat, barley, and rye. A lot of people have problems with gluten, and by cutting out gluten, we could get a lot of 50% more strength in his core. And then he wasn't sure if it was really working or not. So I told him to go have a pizza and then come in the next day and would test his strength. And so he went and had a pizza. Next day, he couldn't even fire the muscle, let alone have any strength in it.
This is almost 15 to 20 hours after the pizza?
Yeah, pretty much. So the pizza's just shut down his digestive system, and then because he shut down his digestive system, kind of getting a pain response in that circuitry, he can no longer fire the muscles that's stabilizing his pelvis.
Fascinating. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because the gut has been on the media's mind and individuals' mind increasingly over the last 2 decades. And if you talk to somebody who is really into natural lifestyle and natural medicine, 200 years ago at a spa in France or in Switzerland, they probably would have had that high on their list, but somehow it disappeared with the rise of Western medicine and pills and injections and 3 meals a day, which I'm not a big believer in. So that went away, and now it's back. How would you sum up, like, let's say we didn't have Western medicine, let's say we didn't have you, but we had you and your intentions and your intelligence on an island somewhere, and you were a person that was like the tribal leader, and you wanted to teach the people on that island about gut health the natural way, without modern remedies, without science. So we had to live off of, like, let's say, New Zealand in the 1600s. How would you go about that in the natural way as the medicine man of our tribe?
Yeah, so traditionally, eating first and foremost, eating whole natural foods, and those whole natural foods, obviously the fiber and the special sugar molecules within those foods, the oligosaccharides, feed the beneficial bacteria within our gut. So we now know that. So I'll try and meet it both ways. I can meet it from the traditionally what we would have done, and then also, you know, where the science now sits in why that's beneficial. So in New Zealand, our indigenous culture here are called Maori, and so I actually did my master's thesis studying Maori diet traditionally, and they were actually deemed. You may have heard of Dr. Weston A. Price. He was the dentist. You know, he went around the whole world looking for healthy people and studying what they ate, and he actually came to New Zealand, and he deemed an isolated group of Maori to be the best, finest physical specimens of any people he'd studied on the planet. And so I don't know if any of you follow rugby, like the New Zealand All Blacks kind of epitomizes that. And then he also deemed them to have the best immunity of any people that they studied on the planet. And so it's you got to, you know, so if I was on this island, I'd be asking them, what did your ancestors eat to get here? Right? What were they doing? So, like, we know with Maori in New Zealand, they were fermenting a lot of foods. They were storing a lot of foods by fermentation. They were so basically taking. So, for example, when the early Spanish whalers came to New Zealand and they traded and got some corn, they would grow corn and then they would put it in a woven kite, a woven basket of sorts, and throw it in the stream. And then leave it in the stream to store it and refrigerate it, and it would ferment in the stream and turn into this kind of thick soup, and then they would eat it. So we now know these fermented foods are fantastic for re-inoculating, and balancing the microorganisms, you know, the microbiome within our gut. And so I'd be very much looking at the traditional foods, and advocating that those would be the best things we could be doing. And so it's it's actually really easy if you're just dumped on on an island and not given a supermarket, your biome is naturally going to get dramatically better, because you're not eating sugar, you're not eating processed grains, you're not eating chlorine, you're not drinking chlorine, you're not doing things that are damaging your microbiome. You're going to be in ideally, you want your immune system fully integrated. So when I say your immune system, I'm also referring to your microbiome, because your microbiome is the first level of your immune system. You want it fully integrated into your environment. And the best way to do that is to be in the environment, be in the soil. And so, you know, that's part of the reason I live where I live. I live on a 15-acre permaculture designed organic nutrient dense farm where we grow 80% of the food we eat. And when I retrained in nutrition, I couldn't buy the sort of food I wanted to eat. I wanted to buy, nutrient dense, organic food, and it's difficult to buy back then, and very expensive. And I was like, my gosh, I'm going to have to grow it myself. And so, kind of brings us around kind of full circle, I suppose.
Yeah, when people ask me what's the toughest thing I have to do every day, and I do something like an hour and a half to 2 hours of what I call mind-body fitness every morning, and there's a lot of meditation in it. So my biggest comment that would be somewhat anti-yoga, anti-meditation, and then anti-fitness is they separate those three. And if you do that, you separate all those things, you wind up having very little time to do any one of those three things well. So the way I do it would be more, I think, like a hunter-gatherer would have done it centuries ago, where on that walk to where the game is coming through, whether it's 8 miles or 18 miles, you're in this meditative zone, maybe a trance, and you have to be aware of your surroundings. You don't want to be attacked by something or someone on your way to the hunt. So you have to be aware, but you also have to be in the zone to calm yourself, to walk with perfect proprioception, with perfect awareness, with good posture, because when you get to that animal, whether it's you alone and you have a weapon, or it's you're doing persistence hunting and you've got 5 people, you need to have your full, maybe 80 or 90% capabilities with you to go on that. If it's a running type of a hunt, you need that full force. So if you're walking a long distance and you're wearing yourself down, it's not going to work. So that's one part. So I think there was a lot of meditation and trance-like things and a spirituality on that hunt. And then when you get there, you may have to, if it's a weight type of a thing, then you have to be like the people who are the people with the long rifles in the military,
Like snipers.
Snipers. Yeah, the snipers, they get their heart rate low. They could be in a survival walled thing that's maybe 2 feet high. So I talk to these guys, they have to be able to do a full exercise program, meditation, go to the bathroom without going up over 2 feet because somebody's sniping at them. So I take all of that stuff, and I typically go to a different place every morning, whether it's a trail, it could be a parking lot, it could be a children's playground, it could be an adult bar area, it could be the beach, any of those, or it could be a martial arts gym or a fitness center. So I do that every morning, and that's not the hardest part of my day. The hardest part of my day is finding what I would call appropriate, because there's certain times I know that my intuition's telling me to eat a certain food, and it's not from a chance binge type of an impulse. It's really from knowing your body. And since I've spent a lot of time what I would call seeking self-mastery, I know what my body needs more often than not. I would guess that by now at 57, I'm probably over 90% knowing what it needs at the right time. So finding that place where I could sit down and have a meal if I'm traveling, and then finding stuff it doesn't have to be organic all the time, but it has to be healthfully prepared and a good quality meat if it's meat, good quality vegetables. That's the hardest thing for me to do in the modern era. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely 100%. I mean, for me, I don't eat organic the whole time either. There's times in my life where I have done, but these days I travel so much that when you're traveling, you can't eat organic, and so it's fine. Like you're saying, it's about eating healthy food, and I'm a big believer that moderation is. Moderation in life is key to being healthful, and so it was interesting to just come back. I love your walking active meditation, and I agree completely that I think in traditional cultures there was a large amount of that. There's a lot of space to just be in traditional cultures, and I actually think that's a very important aspect to mental health, is that we have that space to just be, and be in flow state, and being and another you're almost in oneness in that just beingness, awareness, and so I think that's another kind of key missing aspect. We have a number of essentials that we work with clients to help them be their healthiest, and one of those is meditating every day, and breathing diaphragmatically, and just for obvious reasons is the meditation helps you, it gives you a space to just be, and the breathing diaphragmatically helps manage the stresses that we experience in the modern world.
Yeah, and if people out there want to see more of some of what we're talking about, we can have them go to your website, bepure.co.nz for New Zealand, bepure.co.nz. And for me, they can go to Sifu, S-I-F-U, Slim as in skinny.com, sifuslim.com. And when people don't know what Sifu is, I said, you didn't see Kung Fu Panda, Master Shifu? So Mandarin, it would be Shifu, and Cantonese, Bruce Lee's background from Hong Kong would have been Sifu. And that's like father, teacher, master. And so really, people might categorize me as a fitness guy. I would say that fitness is my number one sport, but I'm really a wellness guy who works on self-mastery, if I had to put myself in one sentence.
Nice.
And so part of my self-mastery is learning from people who know more than I do about their walk. You know more about the college golf life than I do. You know more about the gut health than I do. So my goal is to, with a limited time that I have, open my mind, open my heart, and allow people like you to share their gifts. And then 2 years from now, when you learn something new, or you want to adjust something that you said 2 years prior, then I see you on a YouTube video, or I read your book, or we have a conversation. And then we adapt and we adjust as we go. And that's really what a tribe does. They do what Bruce Lee said: use what works and reject what doesn't work. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I think that's is so profound. It is, at the end of the day, especially when it comes to health and nutrition, we are all very different, and it's about finding what works for you as an individual. You know, we're in a new age of nutrition now, where we're moving heavily into personalized nutrition. Obviously, that's being driven by testing, by genomics, so your genome and your microbiome. And so, you know, I was just thinking at the very beginning when you were talking about how you have trouble keeping your weight on. That, you know, most likely you have strains of bacteria, you know, from the Akkermansia species, which, you know, a lot of research at the moment around Akkermansia. So people who have more of this Akkermansia in their gut tend to not put on weight. And tend to lose weight very quickly. And so obviously there's a lot of people in the world that would really like to be like you. There's a lot of people who struggle to lose weight.
Yes, exactly.
And so, yeah, you know, so the microbiome is directly impacting us at all these different levels. So when you were talking about difficulty in losing weight, I was like, you should probably, you know, start looking at some stool sampling and seeing if you've got, you know, you probably have a lot of Akkermansia, and then obviously fecal transplants is coming very, very quickly. And who knows?
A sample is coming your way in about 8 days.
Nice. I love it.
That's what people do when they care about each other and they open up their minds and their bowels. They send things to each other that are wonderful.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you know, it's coming.
Well, you know, the lions crew, I watch a lot of documentaries on lions. I do watch a lot of documentaries on chimps and bonobos as well. But the lions, to me, are fascinating, far more fascinating. I think on the internet about 10 years ago, I saw that shark videos and Hitler videos were the two most searched and watched videos on YouTube. And then somebody put up a graphic of a shark with a Hitler mustache. I think lions may be coming close amongst the people that were not around or their parents weren't around during World War II, of replacing Hitler, you know, and the Germans during World War II as the most watched videos, because they've got hidden cameras all over the place watching these lions and these different prides. And then as these lion prides get pushed into reserves, their behavior changes. And then sometimes you see two dominant males and a pride, whereas in other prides you had one dominant male. So all of these things are fascinating, and they just keep coming out with more and more high quality videos. But these lions are constantly sniffing the urine tracts that the other lions leave, so that they know when the female comes into estrus, and they know what the male lions, maybe they can tell the age from the excrement and probably the pee and the spraying that these lions do. They can tell the age. So the male lions are weighing, you know, what it's going to take to unthrone the dominant male in that tribe. Maybe you can share your point of view on other animals that you've studied.
Yeah, it's no, that's an interesting insight. I haven't done a huge amount of study into the animal behavior, and that's, so I haven't got a lot to contribute to that. But that's yeah, very interesting.
Do you know about the Hitler? His personal doctor is really good. Burrell or something like that is his personal doctor. Farrell might be. Anyway, this person was pretty advanced for his time, and he took stool samples of Hitler and found that he had a very weak microbiome. And they took, you know, young soldiers who had healthy microbiomes, and they were taking their fecal matter and implanting that in other people. And I think Hitler was the recipient of that as well. He was a vegetarian, but he did so much with legumes that he had a big problem with gas and with keeping his bowels, you know, somewhat uniform. So he probably could clear out a room. So you know, at the end of his life in that bunker, it probably wasn't a happy place for people to be around. And he also had horrible halitosis. So maybe you can talk about people under stress. They think he might have been syphilitic, and Parkinson's syndrome. So all kinds of the whole world against him, caving in. So depressive probably, and then anything else that was going on in his life, and then the gut and the legume diet for these types of people who swear by that but may not have a healthy microbiome.
Yeah. That's interesting. You point to a number of points within the Sifu that I find of interest. The first thing is that the Germans were very, very ahead in studying the microbiome, as you state. And so they actually isolated a beneficial strain of E. coli called Nissle, Nissle, and that they identified that in World War One. See, a lot of soldiers in World War One in trenches were dying from dysentery, and yet some soldiers were completely immune to dysentery. And so they started studying the microbiome. So, this is in early 1900s, obviously. And they started studying the microbiome and found that the ones who didn't get dysentery had this beneficial E. coli. So they isolated it, grew it, and then gave it as a supplement to the rest of the army to stop dysentery, to stop them from dying in the trenches. So beneficial E. coli, I'm not sure if it's available in the US. I'm not sure with the FDA, but it's available in Australia. It's not available in New Zealand, so we bring it in from Australia. But it's an incredible beneficial bacteria. It's a beneficial E. coli, specifically for the bowel. It's quite incredible for not only constipation and also diarrhea. So it's kind of interesting that you know that about Hitler. I didn't know that about Hitler, but I know the science behind beneficial E. coli and this. I also understand that Hitler's doctor, they were using a lot of, essentially methamphetamine and cocaine, and so he was pretty juiced up, apparently.
Like
and
Michael Jackson, he had things to go to sleep, things to wake up, and
absolutely.
They didn't have Xanax. They had alcohol. What else would they have had in that time to calm them down? What other types of sedative?
They're probably using Valium or something like that, I would imagine. So probably. I mean, some of these old heavy drugs that work really almost too well, and that's why they're not used anymore.
Dr. Morrell, Morrel was his personal physician. There's a really good documentary. When you see some of these documentaries with the footage from the 1930s and 40s, you're thinking, how did they get all of this footage and these images of these people? Because there were thousands of the people, the high echelon people in the German war machine, but they've got so much information on them. Even though the Germans at the end tried to destroy a lot, there was just a lot of information. So these documentaries keep coming out with more and more high production value information.
Well, the Germans are really ahead in health. I mean, for me, I would probably say they still lead the world in health. The Germans and the Austrians. So, for example, I've had a number of very advanced, stage 4 cancer clients and things like that. I don't try not to work with clients with cancer for obvious reasons, but they've ended up at my door, and I've referred them to clinics in Germany with incredible results, doing a lot of quite advanced alternative, but heavily researched by doctors. So they're a lot more. For me, they're a lot more advanced in their medical health prescription than we are, let's say, having lived in the UK. I've lived in, obviously America for a number of years, and then living in New Zealand, where the Western medical diet has become quite narrow in its application.
There was sticking with the lovely theme of war for a minute. In World War I, in the trenches, there was a doctor or a clinical nutritionist who had a top radio show in America from the 60s through the 80s, and he wrote a book called Low Blood Sugar and You, and his name escapes me for a minute. I don't want to do a search because I don't want to somehow lose our video camera right now.
Sure.
But one thing he did talk about was the American diet of the donuts, coffee with sugar in it, and how the blood sugar was all over the place with the American diet, whereas the Brits were doing more sausages and more fat in their diet. So they were able to keep their blood sugar more level and had better sleep and better so many things. The Germans' strong point, I'm not sure what their diet was, but they did build the best and cleanest trenches. So they had like the Ritz-Carlton of trenches, whereas a lot of the other groups were walking around more in sewage with walls collapsing and lots more mud and rodents.
Yeah, that makes sense that they were onto it. There's something you said in the middle of that I was like, oh, we should talk about that, but it's gone now.
Low blood sugar.
Yeah, there you go. So the blood sugar side is absolutely key, and so for me, I'm a big believer that there's a genetic continuum around blood sugar levels. So at one end of the scale, you've got people who are genetically quite well adapted to being vegetarian type diets. So, Asian type cultures, Asian type genetics invariably quite well adapted to carbohydrates. You can give them white rice and measure their blood sugar levels, and their blood sugar levels are stable from white rice. Whereas you give me white rice, my blood sugar level is going to spike at 8 or 9. All right, and so at the other end of the continuum, you've got like tribes of Native American Indians or Greenland Eskimos who are getting a lot evolutionarily getting a lot of their calories from proteins and fats. So there's some tribes of Native American Indians that got up 80% of their calories from buffalo red meat.
Yeah.
All right, and the interesting thing about them is that they didn't even have a word for cancer in there you're right. And so it's about eating the right foods for you genetically to stabilize your blood sugar levels. So when I eat carbohydrates, even the healthy carbohydrate like brown rice, my blood sugar levels spike quite quickly, and then stable blood sugar levels is the key. Stable blood sugar levels mean stable mood, stable energy, stable hormones, stable weight. And so for me, one of the foundational things that we work with clients is teaching them how to stabilize their blood sugar levels and eat kind of genetically appropriately without having to do genetic testing. And there's some great tools maybe some of your listeners can do. You can buy, there's a Lifestyle Libra and you may be interested in yourself, Sifu. By the sounds of it, you're more on the carbohydrate side and you probably have quite stable blood sugar levels already. But you can just buy a little patch that it's got a little interstitial needle that you wear. You can't feel it, and it talks to your phone. And it monitors your blood sugar levels constantly. So they're obviously designed for type 2 diabetics. And so you can just wear this and start eating all sorts of different foods and just see which foods stabilize your blood sugar levels. And those will also be the foods that make you feel better. They'll also be the foods that probably help your digestive system. There'll be foods that give you more energy. The foods that also help you sleep better. And so, it's a great little way to have an insight into actually what's going on. Now, obviously, if you're listening to your body like yourself, you may not need that because you feel it. Like for me, I've been around this long enough that I know when I've eaten a food that unstabilizes my blood sugar levels. Doesn't mean I don't always eat them. Sometimes I like eating them because I'm eating them for other reasons than for nutrition. I'm eating them because they release dopamine and make me feel good. That's nutrition.
So. Yeah, I remembered while you were speaking, Ben, the gentleman from the New York on WR radio, which was the powerhouse and may still be an AM dial in New York. I think it's AM. It's his name is Dr. Carlton Fredericks, and he was a very articulate individual. He may have been born in England. If not, he had that accent like Jackie Kennedy had, which was semi-affected British accent from the people who went to the elite prep schools. And boy, was he well spoken. But when I bring anyone up in any conversation and saying to read their book, I am not saying by any means that I espouse 100% of what anybody says. I'm telling people this is someone who's got some interesting observations, and then take a look at it and run this through your own tests, your own rigor to see what you think of it, and then try things out that are healthful tryouts, not starvation diet type tryouts, but healthful tryouts with people like Ben monitoring your blood sugar level. So I'm a different cat than, I think what they should do on these tests that they do. I know they did that big nursing study down in the Southern California area of the Seventh-day Adventist nurses, that study? And that was one of the longer ones with people who are non-alcohol consuming people that had lower stress for, people who work 40 or 50 hours a week. They had their spiritual side. They had some sort of group dynamic. They had a lot of good things. Here's what I'm going to tell people. I would consider, this is a huge, huge statement that I'm going to make, but I'm going to have to say it eventually. So here it is. The healthiest people as a group that I know are the people who work at organic farms. And I only know the ones who do that in France and in America. I don't know the ones who do it in other countries. But when I've hung out with these people and I've listened to them and how they approach their spiritual side, animals, plants, their living set up, using feng shui, their own way, and the way they dress and the way they talk about hemp and natural and the way they have that aloha spirit. As a group, they are the most healthful group, positive intentions that I know as a group. Now, I'm going to tell you one more thing that they don't have, and I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because my intention was to live the most well life I could with the most health pursuits in a low-key fashion, not high-performance fashion, a low-key, more namaste, more hunter-gatherer, tribal. I would have been like the medicine man of the tribe, not the medicine man, the political medicine man, but the wellness and spiritual and keep everybody together and happy medicine man. But what those poor people don't have, and the key word was poor, is they don't have enough income at most of the organic farms that I know, unless they're the owner, to get up and leave and go on a trip somewhere and experience something different. They don't have the ability to save for retirement. And when you know that you're someday in the modern material world that you can get somewhere eventually and your retirement accounts is going to grow, unconsciously and consciously, that gives you this breath 24 hours a day that, hey, finally, I'm going to be able to do my own thing. And I'm not going to have to answer to anyone else who owns any farm or any industry or any highway or whatever. And that's the thing that I think is lacking. I wish them all the best, and I'm here to support them. But the poor people who do that lifestyle, they have lack of travel, lack of experiencing new stuff physically. They can do it, through the internet, and then lack of the ability to get out of there and get in an SUV that they paid $50,000 for and go, I'm done with this place. And so maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think what you point to is the modern is very insightful, and is the modern day dilemma. Absolutely, the modern day dilemma is that we know to be healthy doesn't take much to be healthy in the modern world. Bit of land, bit of community, strong spiritual belief, meaning in life. But when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and security is the base one. And in the modern world, what is safety and security? It's money. And so, trying to balance this balance between having safety and security and not giving a shit about the world, in regards to I live on this incredible farm, but I'm generally, I like to say I'm a recovering workaholic, but I work off the farm. I traveled 38 weeks last year, so 38 weeks of the year.
And you have kids?
I've got kids, yeah.
And you travel 38 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so I've got an incredible wife, and I get back usually on most weekends. I'm here, but that's I can't afford to live on this farm if I was just living on the farm. Yeah. I couldn't afford to even pay the rates if I was living on the farm. And so this is the challenge of the modern world. And so I found my way of finding that balance. And at the end of the day, I've got a lot of passion for helping people and connecting with people. For me, one of my primary drivers is love and connection with people, and so traveling and talking to people enables me to do that and meets that need. But yeah, I think that's a big problem for a lot of people in the modern world, is that people kind of just throw the baby out with the bathwater, go, that's it, I'm just going to go work on an organic farm, or I'm just going to be a yogi. Really, really attractive, don't get me wrong. That's it, I'm just going to be a yogi. I'm not going to care about anything, which is great. But there's always maybe that niggle that, hey, am I going to have the money? And don't get me wrong, ideally, if we had enough faith, we would just go, the universe is going to provide that when I need it. Yeah. But that takes a lot of faith to say that.
It does. I know that when I've been doing the digital nomad lifestyle for a little longer than 3 years, and the amount of freedom and learning, because learning is my favorite thing to do. Being well is my default setting. I work on that consciously, unconsciously, listening to people like you and working, constantly adapting. But that's my default setting. But what stimulates me to get through the 24 hours and get through the week and the month and the year. It's intellectual pursuits. And as soon as you travel, in my opinion, if you keep an open mind and an open heart, you can't help but learn. And for a person like me who talks to people, like I'm in Trader Joe's, the supermarket in America today, and I meet a guy right off the bat who's wearing a t-shirt that said something about waves. And I asked him if he was a surfer. Pretty soon we're in a conversation for 20 minutes, and he was a former pro beach volleyball player. So he's going to be on my YouTube channel in the next month talking about his life. He's about 60, and the setbacks that he has physically, you know, his shoulder, his hips, etc.
Yeah.
And to how his life changed from being a high performance athlete, training 6 or 7 days a week and giving it all to be a pro athlete, which was a real challenge to him. But anyway, that's how I roll. I meet people like that because I've kind of got the open mind and open connection type thing. And then I learn, and then I'm able to take that person and get his story out and get your story out. And hopefully everybody will learn, and we can have this tribe that's limitless, you know, through the digital airwaves. We can have like a limitless tribe. So that's one of the goals I have, is to keep traveling, to keep bringing this. But at some point I may go to the organic farm and go, I want to live here 8 or 10 or 12 months of the year and just have my hammock and have my food and have my community. That may be right around the corner, or 10 years from now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very cool. I have a quick question. How did you hear of me, Sifu? Because I'm in New Zealand. I'm fairly well known in New Zealand, right? Like, so we've only got like 4 million people, and we have like about yeah, exactly, not many people, and so we've got like over 100,000 people that follow me through social channels. So that's like 2% of the country follow me, and so I'm fairly well known in New Zealand. But I've never targeted America or anything. So how did you? I'm just curious.
Well, what I tell people about my my project, the Aging Athlete books and interview series, I tell them that it's very likely that I didn't choose this project. This project chose me, because I've always followed athletes, and I've been an athlete, but I'm not a caliber that played at college and beyond college. I would have been more, I still am, you know, a coach to these people. So if there are any athletes out there who need what I would call, mine is like the full package. It's not your golf swing only. It's your whole lifestyle, even your finances. I know all that stuff. I've been around finances for 40 years. I know lifestyle. I know motivation, meditation, doing the right thing. I know that you have to let off steam. You don't just sit in your room all the time like Bjorn Borg did in his hotel. You got to go let off steam at the disco or somehow tribal dance, whatever. You got to reset every so often. So I'm looking for athletes, or even one athlete who wants to share 2 weeks a month or 2 years with me, and I'll travel with them. And they have to have $1 million of income to hang out and to be able to afford to have 2 people traveling around, because I'm not going to do it for $10 an hour. It's like, this is your life, and I'm helping you maintain your elite level and advance your elite level, not to be Bernhard longer, because that's nearly impossible, but for 10 years, maybe on the tour, if you want to be an elite level or a tennis player or whatever your sport is. That's the type of person. So how I found you is really, I think that the universe put us together. So I search around on the internet. I learn a lot from YouTube and Wikipedia and other sources, but I stumbled onto you, and I watch a lot of stuff. And when I watched yours, I said, this guy is it. When you mentioned golf, that solidified the deal. You know, I grew up like in Saint-Nom-la-Bretèche near Paris. Have you ever played there? The Lancôme Trophy. Anyway, my friend Stefan, who was an elite level junior golfer, he and I met through a golf exchange back in 1979, and then I worked at the French Open tennis matches with Bjorn Borg subsequent to that. So I've been around these people, but I knew at 16 that Stefan was an elite level golfer who was more of an artist of golf. I'm more of an athlete who plays golf, who does this, who does that. Sure. I play like 15 sports, and I'm probably like a B- in 15 sports, where my friend Stefan is an A+ golfer, and in terms of visualization, he's A++. But he's a father and a businessman, but he can still shoot 70. So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty fun. Yeah, it's always fun.
So
awesome. That's cool. I was just curious.
Yeah, we should probably regroup at another time, because this has been wonderful, and we have this good connection, you and I. So why don't we'll say goodbye to our viewers right now. And
Yeah.
keep me in mind for any athletes you know who need a coach, mentor,
Yeah, sure will.
Sifu, father, teacher, master. And I'll be happy to read the rough draft of your next book and share some of my insights on that, because I'm also a writer. I spend a lot of time writing, and so that's something I'd be happy to do for you. So thanks so much, Ben. And
Cool.
remind
Thanks
me
for
of
having me on, Sifu.
remind me of your website and any other video things
Yeah,
that you're
so
working on.
yeah, so people check us out, www.bepure, as in I want to be pure, not that you have to be pure to be pure. .co.nz. You may not be familiar with that .co.nz, but that's our country sort of code, I guess, for the internet. .co.nz. And Facebook, Instagram, Be Pure Ben Warren. And all the best to you. Easy, I know, eating healthily in the US, but I wish you all the best, and go well, be well.
Let's tee it up sometime, brother. And I'm going to sign off. Sifu Slim at sifuslim.com. Wishing everyone all the best in their health, happiness, and wellness. And please give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and check out Ben's information on the internet, and leave some fun and respectful comments below, and we'll see what we can do to answer any questions you may have. Big aloha, cheerio, uru, tschüss.